Special meeting of the Board of Directors of the Golden Rain Foundation, Monday, August 5th. Acknowledgement of media. Approval of the agenda. Seconded. All those who approve? Good, thank you. Chair remarks. I just would like you to be welcomed to this event and say that I am going to be handing this over to Treasurer Diane Phelps. And I'm going to start here on number 5 and have her be in charge through number 8. So thank you, Diane.
You're welcome. You're going to do 5 though, is that right?
Oh, okay, I'll do 5.
Yeah.
I didn't know, who does 5? I'm not sure. I'm doing 5. Member comments, items not on the agenda. Chris, do we have anybody?
Yes. Our first speaker is Brian Gilmore.
Thank you. I'm Brian Gilmore from Unit 333A, and I want to make some comments about, I've called into the office over here several times, and, you know, first event, they sent me a circular loop. They had 4 people come out for a leak in the patio. I mean, to me, that is a waste of money, waste of time. And when I called back, they wanted to send water intrusion back. That was the first people I talked to. Okay, so that was not acceptable. Second thing is ongoing. And that's, we've been asking for the shrubs near our house, our manor, that separates our manor from the parking lot, to be trimmed for over a week. We asked to speak to the foreman, and I have not been able to speak to the foreman. These are the shrubs. They're wild. This is a picture of a tree near the house. I think it's a great place for skunks or coyotes to live if they wanted.
I'll do it.
So, you know, we have not had a resolution with this. I spoke to Maribel today about this, and she wouldn't come out. She wouldn't really listen to us. She had a different story from what there was a landscape guy who came out.
Brian,
Yes.
excuse me, I need to say point of order here. This, the place for you to take all of that information, and I appreciate the fact that you've got detail, that needs to go to a landscape meeting.
I'll take it to a landscape meeting,
the
but
ones
my
that
point is
deal
that
with
the
that.
larger organization will take the specific landscape deal to the landscape committee, but my point is, it seems like when we call into one of the departments for a member service, there's not responsiveness. It's poor customer service. That's my point. And that is at this level. So that's my point. That's what I'm asking for.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you.
But you could also go to your mutual meeting. I don't know what, okay. But the CEO is here, so I think he probably noted it.
It looks like he's taking notes. Chris?
Our next speaker is J.R. Buckley.
It's actually SK. Jim Buckley, 4008, SK Park, 4008, he's the F. Our question has to do with the budget was handed out July 10th.
Wait, that's
Some
what-
items.
That's what we're talking about.
Oh,
Some items.
excuse me. We're talking about that today, so that's on the agenda. We are only coming up in member comments, something not on the agenda. That is on the agenda.
Will we be able to speak on these subjects then?
Yes, you'll be able to speak when it's time for members to comment.
Okay.
And I can keep your name on the list. Yeah, of course. Our next speaker is Rainer Rothberg.
Hi, Rhonda.
Hello, Raina.
Hi. What prompts my comments here was the letter to the editor
Which one?
about the dues, the assessment. We all, the mutuals and GRF, have to do a much, much, much better job of explaining to the residents that GRF is only a very small portion, whatever it is, $202 of the monthly assessment, that the rest of it goes to the mutual. And the letter writer is not alone. There are too many people here who do not understand the difference between GRF. They don't know that they live in a mutual or which one it is. And we, and of course, I'm speaking about the towers as well, we need to do a much more aggressive job letting the residents know that the monthly assessment primarily goes to their homeowners association, their mutual, and that only a very tiny percent goes to GRF. Well, it depends what your assessment is. If it's over $2,000, it's only a tiny bit of the assessment. But I mean, really, I talk to people all the time, and they don't have a clue about any of this. So we have to be much more aggressive, I think that's the only word, letting everybody know. I mean, I understand you can tell, and it goes one ear and out the other, but we still have to do something about it so they understand. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhonda. And we do have our treasurer and our chair of our Media and Communications Committee both sitting to my right. And I know that the two of them are going to be talking about it and coming up, brainstorming some ideas of how to reach out to our community with that information. And I see another member of the Finance Committee sitting over there, and she can jump in with her ideas too. And somebody else on M&C that can jump in with ideas. Okay, thank you. And who's next, Chris?
Our next speaker is Jenny Firmer. Oh, okay. Our next speaker is Cash. Ackrock.
Good afternoon, Cash Ackrock, 201E. Our people who play golf and eventually get to a point that their age reduces their skills, their distances, etc., but they still want to play with the group they have been, and eventually they have to quit. But then they meet in number 19 hole, and their health, their mental goes down. Somebody has come up with a device, a club, it's called Power Club, and I'm trying to bring a demonstration for that club. The idea is it's not a PGA approved club, but it is to extend the life of people who golf a few more years to golf life. And it's something that's interesting, and I thought I'll get a small demonstration going this Friday in our driving range at 3 p.m. Whoever wants to attend this demonstration is welcome. The idea is to have our senior people who retire be able to play a little bit longer with their friends. And it might be something that will be able to accommodate. Thanks.
Good. Thanks, Cash.
Thank you.
No more member comments. Thank you. So we will now move down on the agenda to items for discussion and consideration. Item 6 through 8 will be Diane's lead.
Does anyone want to make comments? Did anyone want to make any comments about the member comments? Is that what you asked?
Oh, Pat does.
Yeah.
Yes, I just wanted to say to Rhonda, don't forget too, that you have a different management company.
But still, that has nothing to do with the GRF assessment.
Well, yeah, but you're management company, I would think.
Could you get closer to your mic so that everybody can hear you?
Sorry, I didn't have it on, that's why. I was just suggesting that towers use their management company to help them understand some of the things.
But the man who wrote the letter doesn't live at the towers. He lives in the village. I don't know which association.
Well, it's good advice in any case, Raina. Thank you.
The only thing I would add is that Also, when you look at what GRF does, we don't just do the facilities. So that when you look at even the, especially in the case of the towers, well, all of them, we're just a portion of the assessment, and only a portion of that is actually for the, for the clubhouses, what you'd think of as recreation. The rest of it supports the operation of the village itself. The rest of the village. And I just wanted to, what Cash is doing on Friday, it's just a demonstration, so it's not, that they're not selling anything, we're just going to see what the idea that he has, and with some luck, maybe, we'll even get to sell it here in our pro shop or something, but, okay, we're good then? Nobody else has any questions? Okay, or comments on, okay, so, I'm gonna do, the next three, the 6, 7, and 8. And so I first wanted to give you some ground rules of how we're going to conduct today's meeting. Item 6, we're going to review the GRF 2020 business plan. Jeff and Betty are going to give the presentation of version 2 in its entirety. Then we'll move on to item 7, where board members' comments. So when Jeff and Betty have completed their presentation, I'll start at one end of the dais and I'll go around so that each board member gets to have a turn to ask questions and make comments. And then staff will reply to each of the board members' comments and questions before we move on to the next board member. And then we'll move on to item 8, which is member comments. So at that point, which is as is the case in all board meetings, after the board meetings members have finished asking questions, then the audience members will be allowed to come up and comment and ask questions. You can come up one time and you have 3 minutes. If you want to speak, fill out a card. We'll have all audience members make their comments before staff and the board reply. I'll start with staff and let them reply first, and then I'll go down the dais and see if anybody has any comments. So, because this is going to be a high-level discussion of our business plan versus the line-by-line detailed discussions that we've had for several meetings in June and July to review the fees, the capital projects, and the business plan, and because those were more like workshops. Or a workshop format. Comments and questions need to be on topic and within the time limit imposed. We're interested in hearing constructive suggestions and comments, but this is not the forum for grandstanding or pushing some other agenda. As with all board meetings, we will keep the crosstalk to a minimum. At the end of item 8, the board will vote on any directions or changes or recommendations we may have. And I'm going to hand it over to Beth, and she will close out the meeting. So, if we're ready to, if everybody's on board, okay, then I'm going to hand this off to Jeff and to Betty. So Jeff, I think you're first.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. We're going to start off by showing you our budget calendar, and talking a little bit about that, and then walk you through a couple items. On the board up there for people to see, and in your packet is our budget calendar. Obviously, today's July 8th. Today is the GRF meeting. I apologize for that. In which we're going through, and Betty's going to do the primary presentation of your 2020 business plan. What I wanted to mention with regards to the calendar is that we've had several meetings leading up to this at the staff level, working on the capital improvement program, working with the board previously and what our workshop was indicated, and then presenting version 1 to you already, in which we continue to tweak and are here today to present to you version 2 and for your recommended approval moving forward. The next slide is, I just want to reiterate our mission statement. Our mission here is to ensure that the village, Laguna Woods Village residents receive unparalleled opportunities to enjoy the utmost in active living. So our statement that we believe in, and to do that, we have to put together a hearty and effective budget process, which we're presenting to you today. Relative to our budget highlights, we started this whole process, as you know, working on a strategic planning goal supported to ensure financial stability and longevity for the village, to improve customer service and meet our residents' needs and concerns. We want to attract and develop and retain high-quality staff so that we can implement those required needs of our community. We have an implementation of technology advances so that we can keep up with in today's world. And the important part there is, again, to provide quality services to our community. And then upgrade our infrastructure. Without upgrading our infrastructure and maintaining our infrastructure, we run the threat of having special assessments or having the need to see tremendous growth in our assessments, which because of the actions that you've taken in the past and what we are projecting for the future, you haven't had to do that. So I think that's a very, very positive note. The last thing I wanted to note here was this is giving you a slide of the basic monthly assessment. You have the United members and third members, and then in the middle there you have the GRF assessment, which is $205.60. So that gives the United number in total of $603.04, and for third, $650.54. The $205 and 60 cents for GRF, I think the one thing I wanted to note was going back and doing some calculations and just getting ready for this meeting. And I noted that if you do a 10-year average, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute, if you do a 10-year average of the GR assessment history, you actually are $1 lower than you look at that 10-year average in next year's assessment. So I think you've done a really good job of watching your budget and presenting that. As you can see there, the 2020 version 2 is 205.60. Like if you go back basically to year 2010 through 2019, that averages out to 206. So it's just a little over 206. So the bottom line there, I think staff's done a great job of looking and preparing the budget for you today. I think you as a board have given us clear direction on what you can handle and what you think are important with regards to those programs, and we will now start the process of presenting that to you in more detail. And with that, I'll turn it over to Betty to follow that through.
Good afternoon, and welcome also to our meeting audience here, but also on TV. We're glad to have this opportunity to present the business plan in a format that everybody is available to view on Channel 6. We are getting ready to present this budget for approval at the regular September board meetings. So at the board meetings, you'll hear a budget resolution read, which is a big, long narrative. But today we're going to go over in detail those numbers that you won't see in detail at those September meetings. And of course, the timing of this is such that we need approval at your September meetings so that we can turn around the required reports and disclosures that have to go out to all members before the end of November. So Civil Code requires at least a 30-day notice before your assessment changes, and we have to work backwards and get all the reports in place and your coupon books updated and your easy pay information transmitted to the bank. And so that puts us here. This has been a very long spring and summer, and by no means has this the second meeting to review your budgets. You've had several, and this process all started earlier in the year. So one more summary slide that we wanted to give you some history of the assessments here before we move on to GRF specifically is staffing. And for next year, the staffing budget is proposed with 751 full-time equivalents. Now we use that term, full-time equivalents, or FTEs, because we do have a lot of part-time staff members. So maybe we have 900 staff members, but several people filling one position, or the hours equivalent to one position. So 751, and you can see back to 2011 on this graph that we're really maintaining, or even below, the staffing levels of over 10 years ago. So we feel like we've been able to provide improvements in your services and your technology and be responsive without big increases in staff. We're going to go department by department here and talk about that staffing. And we do this at the GRF meeting because, as you know, this is shared staff. I don't have an accountant or a plumber that is just for GRF or just for United. So we're going to top side consolidated for a little bit. And so starting with the Office of the CEO, this is 10 full-time equivalents. And That's an increase of one position for 2020, and that position has already been added to staff. That's an additional marketing content editor for your marketing and communications program. That serves all three of your entities, and Towers a little bit in the aspect that they're members of GRF and benefit from those services as well. Then we have Resident Services Department, which has a proposed budget of 35 full-time equivalents, and we were able to reduce a position here. They had an unfilled supervisor position for a few years. That work has been absorbed by other existing staff members, so we removed that position from the budget. General Services Division is proposed at 91.57 full-time equivalents, and that is a reduction of 1.5 positions, and that's because of a reorganization that occurred last year where we eliminated the department head of resident services and a separate department head for landscape services. Both of those departments now report to the COO, and we have senior level managers instead. So what you're seeing here is the impact of that change. A lot of times something happens during the year, and it's not till we get to the budget preparations that the budget catches up to those changes that might already be a year old. So you're seeing that here on this one. And then in landscape services, there's an increase of 6.73 FTEs. And this is a correction to the budget. We had a turnover reduction, or in years past, there was a lot of turnover in the landscape department, and so this was a mechanism they used to artificially lower that budget. But and there were some positions added last year to improve your landscape service levels that were not yet in the budget. So what you're seeing here is a budget that reflects your existing staffing levels and services. Broadband services, no change. That remains at 23 full-time equivalents, and same with information services at 10.5 positions. Financial services does show an increase to 31, and this is an increase of 1 full-time equivalent. That is a position we've added, a managerial level position to improve the AR and internal control functions in finance. And security services, you see 1.5 full-time equivalents, bringing that up to 119.68 is their total budget. As you can imagine, there's many part-time positions in security, much of which are filled by resident employees, and so you see basically a net increase here based on the scheduling needs in the various areas. This also includes compliance and social services. So this is not just security operations. In recreation, we have an increase of 1.25 staff years, and that is bringing them up to 86.36. And this is the addition of a pool specialist. It's a position that was actually moved over from the M&C department to bring that work more in line with the facilities that are supported. And human resources, no change, 8.4 full-time equivalents. And the last line here, maintenance and construction, a net increase of 1 position. We actually had 2 additions here for positions that have already been approved, and that's an inspector 2 and alteration coordinator position to enhance your and support your volume of inspections and alteration permits. So in total there, you can see that same number we saw on the graph, the 751 full-time equivalents for your staffing. So on this next slide, slide 10, we're just taking a look at the components of your GRF business plan. That assessment is currently proposed at $205.60, which is an increase from your current year budget of $2.77 per man or per month. That's a 1.4% increase. And although your operating costs did go down for reasons that we're going to discuss as this presentation proceeds, you have addressed your reserve needs with a $2 increase in your reserve contribution and a $3 increase in your contingency fund contribution. And we'll talk more about those in just a minute. On slide 11, we have a visual presentation for you, for those who like pictures instead of all these boring numbers. And we want to remind you that many of your revenues come from other sources than the assessment. And these are important elements that help keep your assessments down. And these non-assessment revenues include broadband services, where you collect money for premium services such as movie channels and also rentals of set-top boxes and high-speed internet revenues. And so that helps lower the overall cost of your broadband operation. The second highest piece of this pie is trust facility fee. That's the $5,000 that's charged at the time of an escrow closing, and that money goes into reserve. So you won't hear about that as I go through the operating portion of your business plan, but that helps fund your reserves plan. And then you have your golf revenues, which is your greens fees, your merchandise sales, your cart rentals, and so forth. Then you have rentals and event fees in the clubhouse, GR facilities, and then lots of miscellaneous fees. And so in total, we're reducing your assessment by that $13 million, which avoids $60 per man or per month that you would otherwise have to pay. So these are important sources of revenues where you're able to pass on the cost to either the user of the facility or new members coming into the community. And then on slide 12, we also have a picture here to show you the components of your total expenses. So your gross expenses in GRF are $37 million. And of course, the primary component here is compensation. As you would expect in a service organization, most of the things that are done here in your community are provided by in-house staff. And your outside services, there's the yellow piece of the pie there. So very, very little is outsourced. Most of it's performed in-house. Then you also have this category called cable programming and copyright fees. That's your next highest piece of the expenses, followed by utilities, those outsourced services, and some materials and supplies and insurances. So we'll get into the line item detail here, and we're presenting today by department. And so we're going to start with the Office of the CEO. And these are in no particular order, other than I think it follows the organization of the Green Book. So the board members are familiar with the departments in this manner. And so Office of the CEO is a total budget for GRF of $831,000. This is a decrease of $46,000 compared to the current year, and that's primarily due to adjustments. We were able to look at the current trends and lower your budgets for legal fees, consulting, and postage. Resident services is a net cost of $138,000 for GRF, and that is a significant decrease over the current year, a $388,000 decrease. And as I mentioned, there was a position eliminated for a supervisor in resident services, but also you have anticipated more revenue from the emeritus program parking fee, which was recently increased. And then also, this is an allocated department. And so resident services in the area of the call center relooked at the call center activity and updated their allocations, which assigns more of those costs to the mutuals who are receiving the benefit of those customer service calls. And so what you're seeing here is a shift, less of these expenses charged to GRF and more of it going to the mutuals. We did have some higher materials in resident services for those security access cards and the RFID decals that go on your vehicles, but we also have some revenues to offset those expenses. Moving on to the Department of General Services, this is a budget of $5.1 million. It's an increase of $170,000. And again, this is an allocated department. And so in the area of vehicle maintenance, they have assigned their costs out to the departments that they support for the vehicle maintenance. And so what you're seeing here is, again, a shift of some of those costs out of the GRF work center and into the support work centers, such as landscaping and maintenance that are supporting the mutuals. We do anticipate higher fuel costs, so we have increased the budget for fuel in in general services, as long as some other miscellaneous line items for outside services such as vehicle washing and maintenance of the generators. In landscape services, you have a budget of $1,090,000 for GRF. And this is a decrease of $160,000, and this is due to fewer in-house hours required for work performed primarily at the towers. So Mutual 50 recently canceled their landscape contract with the Golden Rain Foundation and is using their own contractor. And so we were able to reduce the budget by that amount. And also there are some savings in medical premiums in the wages. The Department of Broadband Services is showing you a budget of $1,673,000. This is a significant reduction, and the primary contributor to the decrease in the GRF operating assessment, as we removed a total of $1,280,000 from this budget. This is not allocated to the mutuals. This is 100% GRF for the maintenance and operation of your cable network and your TV studio, your advertising program, and also the internet service. And this reduction is because of a recent board decision to not renew the Fox Sport Network programming, Fox Sports West programming, because of significant contract increases and the impact that was going to have on your community. So that those programming fees were reduced. However, there is a contingency for contractual increases in other channels, and programming is a big portion of your broadband services expense. We were able to offset some of those higher costs by increasing your revenue assumptions for advertising. 2020 is an election year, and so we do usually get more advertising on your channels, and you benefit from those revenues to help lower your costs. The Department of Information Services, this is IT or MIS. It's been known as several different names over the years. And this is a total budget of $970,000 for the GRF portion. And this is also a decrease to GRF of $138,000. And again, this is due to a change in allocations. So we have three major areas where they changed their allocations to reflect the support services provided. And this is one department allocating to another department, right? So IT is allocating out to the departments that have computers and the support that they give them. And then the eventual allocation of those costs follows that work center and where they perform the work. And so more of those costs are reflected in the allocation out to the mutual. Financial services is a total budget of $3,178,000. I always like to quickly point out that that includes insurances, so you don't think I have a team of 30 accountants. And the $1.4 million of this is for insurance programs. The budget did increase $269,000 in finance, and this is primarily due to anticipated adjustments in those premium costs. We met 2 weeks ago with the insurance broker, and they said that the markets are definitely tightening up, as you can imagine if you are watching the news, in both the liability segment and also property. And, the natural disasters affect everyone in the United States, even if it's not necessarily geographic. Obviously, we have some earthquakes to worry about, and that's a separate insurance policy. But when you have hurricanes and floods and so forth, and especially the fires in California, those all contribute to higher premium costs for the property insurance. So we've included that, and as mentioned before, we do have an additional position in financial services, and so that's contributing to this increase as well. Security for 2020 is a budget proposed at $6,241,000, and as mentioned, this is all of security operations as well as the compliance department and social services divisions. And this budget increase is $542,000. And this is primarily due to the 1.5 staff full-time equivalents that we discussed for scheduling needs. Also, some wage adjustment pools were increased to align certain positions with market wages based on our salary surveys, and also a correction to a misstated overtime budget. The overtime budget was mistakenly omitted in the Department of Security, and they rely heavily on flexibility when they have scheduling changes or needs that arise for a 24/7 operation. So this covers dispatch, security patrol, and gates for some overtime when they have sick calls, vacation, or other vacancies or emergencies. There's also Security is one of those departments that's receiving those increased allocations of support from IT and fleet maintenance for the vehicles that they use. Moving on to our last three departments, Recreation Services is a budget of $6,312,000 for the GRF portion. And this is an increase of $923,000. And this is primarily due to a correction of overstated revenue budgets. As we've discussed in finance many times this year, well, I guess almost every time we meet and on your variance explanations at the board meetings as well, you hear about our revenue targets for this year were overstated in anticipation of higher fees and the revenues that those would generate. There was not a mathematical calculation last year related to the fees and the revenues. Just some assumptions were made. And so we've lowered those revenue assumptions back down to be in line with your recent experience. And that includes golf greens fees, clubhouse rentals, event fees, and so forth in recreation. So to a lesser extent, the revenue was reduced for the driving range because you have a renovation project scheduled for 2020, and it's anticipated that that facility will be closed for at least 4 months for that project and not receiving revenues during that time. We did move that pool specialist out of MNC and into recreation, so that's also contributing to this increase. And we do have some increases in utilities based on current usage and projected rates. We do have a contingency there for an outsourced aquatics operation, as indications are that there will be a contractual price increase driven by minimum wage. As you know, minimum wage is increasing $1 every year, every January until it gets to $15, and this is one area that's impacted by that. Human Resources is a budget of $327,000 for the GRF portion, and this increased $50,000 due to increased budgets for recruiting costs to address turnover and added staff support expense. Maintenance and Construction, our last department here, is a budget of $1,837,000 for GRF, and this is an increase of $55,000. And again, like security, this is a department that receives those allocations from other support departments, and so they have an increase here for support from IT and vehicle maintenance. Also, there's some increases in professional fees and permits to support projects. And anytime that the board approves funding for a specific project, those consulting fees are transferred to that project and not left here in operations. Partially offsetting those increases is lower materials anticipated in facilities management. So that brings you back down to that total net operating budget of $27,753,000 for GRF. And so we want to talk about your reserves for just a minute. I have a couple of slides that shifts gears from the operating budget to reserves. And the first one we want to talk about is a contingency fund. Now, for all those line items that I just mentioned in your operating budget, if there is something that comes up during the year that's unexpected and not covered by the budget, then instead of having a line item in the budget called contingency, as you would see in many HOA budgets, due to the size of Laguna Woods Village, and specifically the Golden Rain Foundation, we have a fund where you set aside money into a fund that it's not required by civil code, so there's no balance or calculation that's required here. So it's just the board looking at it and making a judgment call as to how much money should be set aside. And in the current year, 2019, you're contributing $2 per man or per month, or about $300,000 a year. But your expenditures have exceeded that recently. In 2015, you through 17, you had some higher expenses than anticipated, and especially last year in 2018, you had high unexpected legal fees. GRF has been paying for all VMS legal fees, which are employment-related issues, and for 2020, we estimated how much in total we were going to budget, which is $450,000, and then we split that evenly between the three corporations. However, in 2018, GRF picked up all of those unexpected fees, and it drew down the balance of this contingency fund. So you can see the ending balance this year is anticipated to be just over $240,000, whereas at the end of 17, it was about $740,000. So The board would like to build that fund balance back up towards anywhere between half a million, 500,000 to $1 million. And so there's an increase here in that assessment from $2 to $5 per man or per month to replenish those funds. And then moving on to your reserve fund, this one is required by civil code for the eventual repair or replacement of the major components for which you're responsible, which in GRF is all of your facilities and amenities. And we have a budget this year of $17 per man or per month going into that reserve. And we did anticipate a $2 increase for 2020, and which is needed. So we've updated the reserve study and the planned expenditures, and we're still on track to need that $2 per man or per month into your reserve so that you can address these planned expenditures. Now, different than the last slide, I've highlighted this new column on this one. In addition to the assessment going in and some interest you're earning on those invested balances, you also have the facilities fee. And this is the $5,000 that's charged at time of a title transfer, and that's charged through escrow, and you've been able to build up some funds here that is a revenue stream into your reserves plan. So we've been able to lower your reserve contribution. It used to be $32 per man or per month. It was anticipated going up to $35 when you had finally accumulated enough money from this fee that started in 2012 to count on it as a revenue stream to put into your reserve. And so we've brought that assessment down to $17. And then it's going to go up in the next few years to plan for your expenditures. And we do anticipate that about 90% of your resales will qualify for that fee. We've lowered the projected revenue down to $3.7 million because you currently are in a resale market that has fewer transactions, and those transactions are what generate this fee. But you can see after 2020, we are optimistic and hope that that resale volume will go back up. On the next slide, slide 18, we take a 30-year look at this reserves plan. And I know you can't see these numbers, but I just wanted to point out a couple of things because we have talked about the reserves plan in detail with the board. We did start our reserve assumptions by looking at the balance of your reserve fund as of January 1st, 2019. So we looked at the audit schedule, found the ending balance at the end of 2018, and that was our starting point. So you started the year with $22,957,750. Now that $23 million is much higher than where we thought you would start the year because you've had some years where you appropriated money and haven't gotten to those projects yet, or not all of that money has been spent yet. So there's about $17 million that is encumbered that the board has previously approved for various projects. And so off to the right there, in the first 3 years, 19, 20, and 21, you can see that we have spread that $17 million in existing appropriations over the next 3 years as a planned expenditure in addition to your capital plan each year. So assuming that GRF proceeds and completes all of the outstanding projects that are on the books, those planned expenditures are between $10 and $11 million each year for the next 3 years. And because of those carryovers, you do have several years of high expenditure until it gets back down to the $6 or $7 million a year. And so you can see that the projected balance in this fund is going to go from that $23 million, possibly all the way down to $8.5 million if all of these components come to fruition. Now, we do update a reserve study every year because there are so many variables. It's important to know that this is a one-time look at this, and obviously you might earn more money on interest, you might spend less money on a project, and we'll account for that each year as this plan gets updated. And then the last slide on the reserves I wanted to show you is just a visual representation of that 30-year plan. And the orange line there at the bottom, it's a dotted line that starts at $7 million. And with the threshold funding of reserves, which is basically a cash flow, the board has said, we want to evaluate all the money going into reserve, all the planned expenditures, and at the end of the day, we don't want to ever bring the balance down below $7 million. And so that $7 million becomes a cushion or a threshold that the board is comfortable with and would only use those funds if there was something very unexpected that came up that wasn't previously identified in your reserves. Then you'd have to consider that you have that threshold for unexpected items that might occur. But the green line that's charted there and looks real jagged and comes down to the threshold and then builds back up, those are your ending balances. And so we expect in the next 5 years that you're going to spend down to your threshold, which we just mentioned is about $8.5 million in 2024. And then you'll start building up again for planned expenditures each year and then also in the future. It is amazing how much $1 today contributes to a 30-year plan because of the compounding effect of the value of money. And so each of these contributions are equally important, not only in the current year, but for funding your entire 30-year plan. And this plan allows us to answer the disclosure that goes out to your members at the end of the year, where Civil Code says, do you have enough money set aside for your anticipated expenditures? And we check yes, because the board has reviewed all these components and what's going to happen with them over the next 30 years and assured that you have sufficient funding to address those needs. Now, the reserves plan is required as a 30-year look, but we do focus obviously on 2020 specifically as far as project approval. And so I will turn it over to the CEO if you would like him to go through either some or all of the capital plan for 2020 as we've done in previous meetings. And Chris is just going to take a half a minute to pull up the slides. There's a lot of pictures on this capital plan, which is also abbreviated the CIP. If you're here in the audience, there is handouts over on the table if you want to see these slides. And it's called Capital Program Proposals. And if you're on the TV audience, we'll step through it.
Ready? All right. I'll quickly go through these, your capital improvement program. To take one step back, I mentioned when we were having some dialogue with the GRF board members earlier, one of the things in the operating budget that we're recommending under personnel was that we're having again, one of our practices is to evaluate what is the best process for encouraging new employees and encouraging employees that are here to stay with us so that we can build the best organization. One of the ways that we've evaluated and looked at is for our non-union employees, we have a 401k, which is part of their basically their retirement pension plan. We don't have a separate pension plan, so there are contributions to that. And one of the things that we evaluated to enhance was to take the match from the VMS match to the employee match from 4% to 5%. We evaluated that within our compensation budget. We actually are not increasing our compensation budget at all. We just went back and evaluated our usage by our employees, and by the fact of just increasing the opportunity for the 1%, we will be able to compensate that within our current budget. So there's no increase in your budget for that, but it is an enhancement for our employees. So we look forward to implementation of that. On to the capital projects for you. At the very top here is actually a correction I wanted to make, and I'll show you that as we go through. It's actually not $6,050,000. It's a little bit less because when we showed you this the last time, and then we went back and tweaked a few things. But approximately a $6 million capital program expenditures for the 2020 year. Real quickly, vehicles is a big chunk of that, $2 million. Our paving program of $1 million, which is real significant, and I mentioned this before. If we don't continue to appropriately pave our streets and keep them in good foundations, we'll end up paying a lot more in the future. So kudos to GRF board and the staff for putting together a comprehensive paving plan that'll keep us in good shape going forward. Other GRF facilities, this combination, various expenditures of $940,000, golf facilities of $128,000, upgrading our computers, $166,000, and broadband, buying the equipment necessarily to get that out with regards to the changes that we're making in broadband, $420,000. And then, as I said, it gets smaller and smaller, but still fairly significant increases, and we'll go through those in just a second here. As I indicated, it's a $6 million, $5,952,800. It's broken into two categories: equipment fund and our facilities fund. And those are the two categories there, and I'm going to break it down even more now. We did go through and make some tweaks and from recommendations from the board previously, and staff putting together some things that we could take away, eliminate, reduce. So these are project cost adjustments that we made in the areas of Clubhouse 7 lobby furniture, Clubhouse 7 coat closet, Clubhouse 7 patio furniture, Clubhouse 7 commercial appliances, and then standard pickup truck. These are all reductions that we made after conversations with the board and listening to our the residents here. Our 5-year CIP comparison, this kind of gives you a look forward with regards to where we're planning our money and expenditures. 2020 is obviously the $6 million that I just mentioned. We originally started with a concept of $4,366,000 as our planned expenditures in this area. One of the reasons for the increase was specifically in the area of paving and in equipment. We have a lot of pieces of equipment that when we started to evaluate them in more detail were long beyond their best days, and we needed to get them on a schedule of replacement, and so that accelerated that going into the 2020 year. When you look at the future years, we believe that we have approximately the amount of money necessary with the funding that you have now instituted with the 2020 proposed, that we can meet our 5-year expenditure plan. CIP compared to the reserve plan, new projects, the significance that I wanted to mention, tub grinder. This is in our landscape area. We use a grinder to take care of all of our big trees and branches and everything so that we can do increased mulching. This grinder is a larger one than we originally evaluated, but the payback is significant because we use all the mulch that we can generate to send back into our landscaping crews. We don't have to hire and go out and buy additional mulch. So it's a great addition to our team. If approved, we think it'll make our operations in the landscaping just that better, so much better in that area. We have some lighting projects in 2 or 3 different areas that we'll break down, and then our continuation of our Shepherd's Crooks for $240,000. That's get rid of the barbed wire and put up Shepherd's Crook. We have a large productivity suite in our MS office operation, which is $150,000. That's because our MS office is past due to be upgraded, so we need to move that forward, or it won't be continued in the sense of having support. So we need to move forward. And we're also starting a multiple-year central irrigation system upgrade throughout the village. This is really a 5-year program, which will significantly improve our overall irrigation system and hopefully reduce our water consumption or water usage out there, because we'll be more technology enhanced with regards to rainy day time periods, little shut off irrigation, and just more computer knowledge in that area can make us more efficient. As we indicated, we deleted a couple of projects, the community center emergency generator, because we do have the generator for our emergency operations here. This was something that we were looking at as an additional generator, but we feel like we're in a proper place right now and so we didn't need to do that at this point in time. Also, same thing in our broadband infrastructure. We felt that there were some areas that we didn't need to move forward in that, and so we deleted those projects. Project cost adjustments, paving and seal coating and landscaping equipment, those are enhancements. And again, focusing on the fact that if we do a better job in paving and seal coating, we won't have long-term costs going down the road. In the 2020 capital proposal, we have 2,109,000 in vehicles. Our replacement is 1,787,000, and we have 322,000 of additional. And I do want to say again, we kind of fast forwarded some of this replacement of vehicles, which is one of the reasons for the increased costs this year. So there's the all of the vehicles that we are bringing on board. The column on the left, the 1.7 million is the replacement. I mentioned the tub grinder is a replacement, but it is at a bigger and heftier level. And then we have the new vehicles on the right. Did want to indicate with regards to the electric and hybrid vehicles, one of the reasons the emphasis is going in that direction is that we're also looking at receiving a grant, not just for outside of the community center here, but also at our courtyard to add additional electric charging facilities that we're getting through a grant. And so we want to move in that direction with regards to the use of hybrid vehicles. Just real quickly, going to speed through this because I've talked about it a lot. This is the big tub grinder that'll allow us to, one, meet the AQMD emission standards. Our current grinder's not quite meeting all of those all the time, although we've been working with AQMD to keep it going. This new grinder will clearly do that because of its capabilities and the size and being brand new. As we indicated, 45% cost savings by operating a composting center since in 2020. Labor, fuel, plus this grinder will allow us to keep it on site instead of contracting it out and disposing of it somewhere else. I mentioned the $1 million in paving. This is a lot of square feet. Asphalt paving overlay, $661,000. This is when you do an overlay, you have an estimated life of 25 years for this work, so very, very important. And then where you're doing the smaller work, the seal coat programs, the 150,000, that's 1.1 million square feet. The more you use of that process, the less you have to do of that larger $661,000 in future projects. And that's why if you look at that, for $1 million a square foot, we're going to seal coat $150,000 worth, get 1 million square feet done. If you have to go to the overlay, you're only getting 295,000 square feet done, and it's costing you 661. So you really don't want to have to do overlays after overlays. So by doing the concrete repairs and the seal coat repairs, we save us a lot of money in the long term. We're looking at maintenance in a couple of street lighting areas or lighting areas, parking lot, safety lights for $250,000. This is a parking lot that doesn't have any parking lights right now. We actually use rental equipment there. So this would be actually putting in new poles and lighting. And then we have LED walkway lightings for a number of the clubhouses, which we have budgeted. Again, these are approximate budgets. Obviously, when we bid them, hopefully the bids will come in lower and save you even more money. And then we have the tennis court LED lighting, and we're going to be evaluating those units out there to see whether or not we can just replace bulbs versus having to do a whole conversion out there. And the same way with all of this lighting going forward, if we can use solar lighting, we may look at solar lighting as an alternative. We will do whatever it takes to get the lighting done, but in the less expensive and most efficient way. I mentioned the Shepherd's Crook in this area of security and emergency generators, transfer switches. These are upgrades that we're making to make sure that we can just plug in an emergency generator and it'll upgrade those clubhouses 4 and 6. For security, bringing in cameras in a number of the clubhouses just to enhance our security operation. And then we're also, for our team out there, security team, increasing our portable radios and upgrades there. And then we're also adding a couple of speed monitoring devices so that we can continue to work with our residents to slow down in the neighborhood. In the area of broadband, we have set-top boxes, which we purchase, 1,000 units for new and replacement, because we're constantly having new customers and then replacing those that are already in the system. So that's a continuous ongoing operation of buying set-top boxes. Keeps our inventory ahead of schedule so that we can implement that quickly. And then head-end UPS and power conditioner. This is a $120,000 expenditure to replace unit at the end of its useful life. This technology will actually be positive because it'll reduce our power consumption and give us a better responsibility with regards to backup time and overall operating cost. In the area of landscaping, I mentioned $100,000. This is an ongoing project. This is the first year to centralize our irrigation system. Very confident that this will give us an enhanced irrigation system, which is just our one of our first of many steps that landscaping is doing to increase their operation out there. And then in equipment replacement, we have $247,000 to replace mowers and equipment requiring. We've gone past our time frame with regards to buying mowers and getting equipment out there to make our landscaping operation functional. So this is a past needed thing, and that's why I mentioned that we were moving some of our costs up to get some new mowers out there and make us more efficient. With regards to GRF facilities, I mentioned charging stations, service center charging infrastructure that we have with the Edison rebate program. Also, we have an equestrian turf renovation of $50,000, which we have planned for the front end of the equestrian center. It's used for a lot of different events, and it's got degraded, so we need to enhance that for not only looks and benefits, but also from a safety perspective, people using that area. Quickly, CH1, Geneva safety wall padding. For those that have been in Clubhouse 1, you know that the walls are right there, and wood and steel in some cases, and it's easy to run into, so we want to get safety wall padding in there. So it makes it more efficient use of the facility and safer. We have patio furniture in the lawn bowling area that we're increasing. In our capital project, we also have a miscellaneous account, $125,000 and $50,000, so that we can, in a case of emergency or in special needs, we can reach in and make that happen without going back and asking for a supplemental appropriation by the board. We reduced this from last year's number, but we feel that it's an efficient number so we can maintain our operation as proposed. Again, in the area of computers, we mentioned the MS Office Productivity Suite. It's $150,000. This replaces a 2010 MS Office, as you can see. It's a 10-year software lifespan, so we won't have anybody there to support it if we don't move forward with the new productivity suite, so we got to have that. And then we did a small upgrade proposed for our Dayforce module implementation, and this has to do with our HR benefit enrollment and onboarding for their systems. Relative to our community center, we have $145,000 planned for two activities. One is to repair the stucco flashing. It's a replacement program for this building, addressing continually rain leaks. As you know, we received quite a bit of rain in January, February, and March of this year, and one thing we received with it was a bunch of leaks into this building. And so it's critical that we get this stucco flashing replaced. If you recall, when we first were looking at the budget, we also had carpet replacement. We moved that back a year, so we want to get this done and get this completed next year, and then we'll come back in the following year with the carpet replacement. And then the second item there is a parking study. We're still evaluating the changeover and bringing security over here from the courtyard, as I call it. And one of the things that we need to do is make sure with the amount of employees that would come over here that we have adequate parking in the whole area, including our employee parking in the back. So we're going to have a parking study done, professional parking study done, so that we can make sure that we meet all the needs necessary for that move. In the clubhouses, real quick, we have bench-top chairs allocated for Clubhouse 4. We have a lapidary exhaust fan system to be put in, and we have workshop chairs also. These chairs have been around for quite a while, and it was recommended via the Recreation Department and our boards and also our committees on the need for the recommendation to improve there. Also in Clubhouse 4, we have a metal roof proposed to cover our Aku firing area to keep people from being exposed and the equipment from being exposed. And then in the sewing room, flooring and sewing machines, 16 proposed to replace those. In the area of the golf facilities, I have $128,000 budgeted. On the left are the replacement equipment of $118,000, and then we have $10,000 proposed for turf equipment lift, which will allow us again to keep maintaining our golf facility in the manner it is today. With regards to clubhouses 2, 5, and 6, we have $87,000 proposed here. Clubhouse 2, lawn bowling roof. Clubhouse 5, patio furniture and benches. Clubhouse 6, video projector installation. Clubhouse 6, commercial dishwasher. These again are enhancements and then sometimes replacement of old equipment such as Clubhouse 2 and Clubhouse 5. These are 20-year-old pieces of equipment that we're replacing. In Clubhouse 7, we have a commercial kitchen appliance, $22,000. These are pieces of equipment that are end of their serviceable life, and it's costing more to maintain them and try to keep them going than it is to replace them, so we're proposing that. And then we also have lobby furniture. Again, we're trying to upgrade our look out there. We have some dated furniture, and we think we can make the operation and the clubhouse look a little better if we have some upgraded equipment. Also in Clubhouse 7, we're remodeling the storage facility, the patio furniture, and the sound system. Those are the areas that I mentioned earlier that we made a tweak in some of the cost to bring it down into what we think is an appropriate number there. And then the aquatics, didn't mention this specifically earlier, but we also are looking at, with Clubhouse 1, the pool and spa, of upgrading by replacing the deteriorating spa plaster for safety purposes and make sure we have a well-operating pool out there. And that's it with regards to the 2020 capital program. Again, it's not much different than what you saw in version 1. We did slim it down a little bit, and we think that it is an operation and a capital program that we can implement next year and continue to upgrade our system and make it appropriate for the village. Thank you.
Are you good? You guys are both done? I thought
That concludes our presentation.
Okay. Thank you very much. So I noticed where you brought down the figures for our reserves, and also, right, we were at the version 1, we were at $2.99. We asked you to add an extra $1 to our contingency fund, and now we're at $2.77. So just think of what it would be if we had asked you to add $3. We might have been, giving everybody back a dime. No, I don't know. Okay, so like I said, I'll start at one end, and the board members can ask questions. Pat, how about I start with you?
Okay, I just have a couple of little comments. Number one, I'd love to see that vehicle budget trimmed, but I don't have any suggestions for you as to how you could do it. So I'm sorry about that. I hate to give a problem without a solution. However, the next little comment I do have a solution for it, and that is the presentation that we're going to be giving on the reserve funds. And I would like to bring you back to the business plan of 2018. On page 53, you have all the fund balances split out. Now, it would be fantastic if you could carry out that program again, because I have many people constantly asking me, well, how much do we bring in from this? And I think it's really a good idea to have it broken down like 2018, page 53, instead of having it all shoved in one reserve fund, as we have in 2019 and 2020 right now, too. You guys understand what I'm talking about? I think Chris does, because I happened to show him what I was
The
talking
book
about.
you're talking about is the green book, the budget,
Absolutely.
business planning book. Yeah, and it's the 2018 book and how it's presented there as
Yes,
opposed to in the
as opposed to
2019
the
and 2000.
2019 and the one current, yes.
Are you talking about equipment versus facilities versus trust facility fee fund?
Well,
Is that this breakout you're talking about?
the breakout is on page, I gave you the page number, I think it's.
Well, I don't have a 2018 green book with me, so I was hoping you could just
Well, I
name
can
the
bring it
titles.
over here if you like.
Okay, Chris brought it up. Yeah, so that's just, right now, we consolidated it and called it the reserve fund. But it is the equipment fund, facilities fund, and trust facility fee fund.
And I'm suggesting that that's be broken out on the one page as it was in the previous.
Certainly, we can do that.
Great, that'd be wonderful, thank you. That'll save me having to get on the phone and go through all the resales and all that, you know, and try and come up with a figure.
We'll do that in the green book.
Thank you very much.
What's the page reference?
53 of the if you look at the 2018 green book, I think you said it was page 53,
Yeah,
or that's what I wrote down.
thank you.
No other questions?
No,
Then I'll
that's
move-
it.
Okay, thanks. I'll move on to Judith.
I just have a question. So we not doing anything with Clubhouse 3 with 2020? With the 2020 plan? Because I didn't see anything in this presentation. We're not adding anything to last
Nothing,
year's?
nothing in the 2020.
So it still remains, last year was 2019. The $3.5 million that we still have left, we're just going to be using that. Thank you.
Did you have other questions?
No, thank you.
Okay. And you might want to mention the 5-year plan, that there is money in the 5-year plan, I think, or is there for PAC?
Yes, it's in the 2019 capital for the improvements with regards to Clubhouse 3 with the air conditioning and the safety and.
Okay. Because I thought maybe there was some more money in like 2022 or 2023, something like that. Okay. I think Betty's looking at it for it. I didn't bring that with me.
Yeah, because I think that's what confused me. I had just read something that said it was overall going to be $13 million by the time we're done with phase 1, 2, and 3. So I'm wondering, when are we going to look at phase 2? Because apparently this $3.5 million we have now was phase 1. And I have a report back in April 26, 27 from SBA, and who the ones we gave the contract to. And then they were trying to sell us on $7.1 million. And we thought that was outrageous at the time. And I went through the line items. Everything that they quoted to be done for 7.1 is now quoted to be done for $13 million.
So I guess
And-
we sort of are getting off a bit.
Yeah.
So, but to suffice it to say that we have there's no more funding in the 2020 budget, but the 5-year plan, there is some.
There is $2 million planned in the 2021 for Clubhouse, for the PAC renovation,
got it.
beyond what's already budgeted.
Thank you.
Okay, so it's back to the original question. So it's going to end up being 12.8, like it said in the last report?
That's,
No,
we
they
don't,
could
yeah.
change that, I hope.
And that's not really a budget question at this point. It's not a 2020
Well, we're talking
budget.
about the money, because they said, SVA said, responded by, when we said 7 million was a lot to completely redo the building, SVA responded by saying that a full performing arts center can be built from the ground up for $14 million. And so if the demolition report came back that we only had 2% damage in the building itself,
Okay,
I'm
but-
trying to see where this 3.5 million from the budget is going.
Relative to the 2019 budget, the money, the 3.5 million that's been mentioned, is for air conditioning improvements, some improvements in the interior, and for any ADA requirements that are necessary to improve the facility. I'm not specific as to the $2 million in 2021, but that's all that's budgeted at this point.
Okay. Ernesto, did you want to weigh in on this? Or not?
Good afternoon.
No,
I just hopefully not muddy it up, but the funding that's already in the budget, the $3.5 million, will accommodate everything that has to do with the maintenance improvements relative to the HVAC, replacing the HVAC, replacing all the rigging that is shot, as you all know, replacing all the lighting in the main auditorium, upgrading the 2 meeting rooms, upgrading the lobby, and that's pretty much, the audio video as well will be upgraded with that. But that was the basic base contract that you let to SBA to put together, which is the maintenance improvements, really. The money that is in the capital for subsequent years was earmarked in the event that the board decides to move forward with some of the extras in the facility, such as a small theater or upgrading the seating areas, upgrading the restrooms, things like that. But the funding that's in there has nothing to do with that.
Thank you. Thank you.
I do have a detailed list of everything you just mentioned, so I'm not confused about that.
Okay.
I just earmarked, I think that's the word I was looking for. I didn't know if we were still using that.
Right.
Okay,
And we're going to be taking the work from your architectural firm, SVA, to a meeting coming up with the task force. And in there, we're going to, again, spell out everything that it's covered by $3.5 million. So,
Okay, thank you very much.
you're welcome.
And also, I just wanted to add that we had asked the architects at that meeting, which is on the 15th, to come in with dollar signs for things that were projected ideas.
We'll make sure we do.
Okay, so Judith, I think, said she was done, so I'll move on to Don.
Nothing really. We've spent hours and hours, as you know, and we've made suggestions to staff, and they've followed through. They've cut where we've asked them to cut. We've had great suggestions from staff and from the community. I think we've done a pretty good job. You know, $205.60. That's what it was 12 years ago. It's gone up before and then down, so I'm quite pleased. I do have one question of Jeff. Have we ever considered leasing all of these automobiles instead of purchasing? Would it be cost effective to do so?
Actually, in our evaluation as we go forward, once the budget is adopted, both Siobhan and Chris, who oversee the vehicles, we're evaluating that because that is a distinct possibility that, especially with electric vehicles,
Yes.
there's some advantages to the fact that down the road you're going to have to replace a vehicle that has batteries. You may not want to do that.
Okay, that's all I have.
Thank you. Annette?
Okay, I agree with what Don Tibbetts said. Staff has worked tirelessly on this with us to educate us, and also listen to the fact that they've lowered some of the costs and they've postponed some things. I couldn't be happier with the transparency and with the involvement of the community. Thank you.
I'll come back to you. How about that? You can have the last word in this part. Dick?
I only have a question about page 15.
Can you turn it back on, please?
Is that better? Yeah. On page 15, or slide 15,
Jeff, you want, that's the, I think Jeff will address that.
Yes, the charging stations is your question. The charging, this is part of an Edison rebate program. I think we're going to put the slide back up there. Well, I'm not sure specifically what your question is. Is it the?
well, my question is, where's the service center? Charging stations right here. And I'd like to, I have never found out or never heard of any of the costs that are associated with those. And I'm happy that we're putting in the charging stations at the warehouse area because I think we need more electric vehicles, especially for security.
We can get back with that because that's not exactly this
We can
budget.
give, yeah, I'll
Yeah.
get you an update on the ones here.
Okay.
Are you good? Bert?
No, I think staff has done a great job. I will be spending some time later this day with Jeff. I came across a product that has the potential of saving us 20% of our energy budget, which is an artificial intelligence product rather. So I want to talk to Jeff about that because we may want to add some money to the contingency, or either draw from the contingency fund or perhaps actually add some money to the budget. The payback, I've been told, for the product is about 1.5 years. So it's well worth looking at. And it has been prototyped and it's already piloted, so we can actually go and see it if we wish.
Thank you. Joan?
My mic is on, I didn't realize. I'm really pleased with the presentations. Even for me, it was clear. You know, I'm not a financial person, but boy, I could follow everything and see the reasoning behind it. So I really appreciate what staff has done in every way.
And now Beth?
I also appreciate the clarity that staff used in putting this program together. And then just looking at the breadth of what we have to deal with in this community. There's so much to be looked at and pay attention to keeping up the community in great shape. And I applaud the staff for their efforts. Thank you so much.
Okay, so now we will move on to member comments, unless staff had something else to add. No? Okay, we'll move on to member comments, and again, 3-minute limit, you'll come up one time, and we'll wait until all the comments are made, and then staff will reply, and then the board will reply as well. Okay, Chris.
Our first speaker is Brian Gilmore.
About leasing vehicles is a good option. We got to understand the utilization rate, and if we're not tracking the utilization rate on those vehicles, we should be. And then that will build up what we need to go into the negotiation session with the leaser, like Sunbelt, and lease the backhoe or the lifts that they're thinking about. I mean, we're talking about $500,000 worth of equipment that a strong alternative is leasing. There's also some questions I got. I looked at the Kubota tractor, and it appeared to be about twice as much as is on the Kubota webpage.
There it is.
That's an 18 horsepower tractor with the loader, and you got $36,000, and on the Kubota webpage it was $20,000. So maybe take a little bit finer pencil with your calculations. I think we could get part of the way there. The trucks are near list price. Buying 10 trucks, it seems to me like we should be able to go in and make a package deal And maybe we could even make a package deal on the equipment. You know, Kubota, Deere, other companies make a full suite of equipment that maybe we could get a package deal on. Thank you.
Our next speaker is J.R. Buckley and Mr. Park.
You need to address again?
No.
First of all, my name is S.K. Park, reside 4008 2D Kaya Sonora. And I'd like to yield my balance of my time to Mr. Buckley so that he can continue present his findings. Thank you.
First thing I want to look is the office of the CEO. I want to congratulate you for taking that cost down, but I think you're hiding costs in other lines. For example, you have an overtime in 2020 going up 223%. It went from 64,000 to 207,000. You have a line in there that says missing meals. 19, it was 64,000. You're hiding $207,000. And staff sickness, which means you must get a replacement. In 19, you had $200. This year, you have $2,400. And staff support, there's a line there that says you're going from 61,000 to 96,000. My fast math, that wipes out every cost that you had of savings in the CO office. The biggest concern I have is a thing called interest income. You're showing this year you have interest income coming at $637,000. I hope everybody looked this morning, see the market went down. I want you to look at 10-year bond is now 1.7. The Fed is scared to hell. They just took that down. If you're thinking you're going to make money on savings bonds, money market, and generals, please relook at your numbers. They're false. The other thing you should be looking at is security. You're up to $6 million there. This board seldom talks about technology unless Bert talks about it. You spent all this money on the gates, except I used to work out a lot on gym on the 3rd floor. That's been empty for a year and a half. How about we do what an office building now? They have a kiosk there with a picture on the screen. You hit the button, a live person comes on and says, yes, what can I help you? I am visiting Mr. Smith in apartment 1234. They then looked and said, Mr. Smith agrees, go right ahead. You have people sitting there in technology that can be replaced. The second thing I think you should be looking at is under human resources.
You're getting down to 20 seconds.
Say again?
I said you're getting down to 20 seconds.
He asked me if I could take his favor.
He can't. You can't. I mean, that's just not the way we do it.
Human resources, you have $370,000. There isn't a major corporation today that still has their own human resources. Start out like. The last comment, you're going up 6% on your salaries. That's going to go up to $15. I think you start to look outside, start looking at some of the projects you're doing, and start evaluating and see if you can bid that out. Okay. And find out what the marketplace. I second the item on the cars. Everybody should be looking at a discount car, not buy electric. You're absolutely right. That battery's not going to last. Don't buy them.
Thank you.
I thought when I first presented...
I understand that you said that you wanted to yield your time to him, but that's just not the way we do it. So I don't know. You mean you wanted to give him 3 minutes?
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's just not the way we do it.
Oh, well,
Everyone
you can
has,
say,
if there's
you can
something
say
you'd
no
like to say
first. You didn't answer me that, then, okay. Anyway, thank you. That's what his calculation was. I didn't go through with him. However, what I like to say here is, please do not rubber stamp all the staff proposal. You need to review line by line with experts. And good example, do we need really 14 FTE this year? We need to review those, whether that is required or perhaps needed. I hope you review very thoroughly before you approve the budget. Thank you.
Okay.
Our next speaker is Jenny Firmer.
Jenny Fremer, 881 Via Mendoza A. I'm just going to be here a little bit as the advocate for the residents, just because I talk a lot to the residents. Just going to go over a few things. The residents regarding the amphitheater, things that we need, everybody's very supportive of. Any remodeling, the bathrooms, seats, et cetera, people say, we like it the way it is. We'd rather have less fees, association fees, than have all the remodeling. And that's pretty general throughout the whole complex. Just going to just make some comments. On the electric charging, people have questions. Is that something that people have electric cars? And I don't know if we're going to use it for electric cars for the campus, but will people that are using electric cars be putting any money towards that? I mean, I know you're going to go for a grant. I used to do grants. You don't always get grants. You know, we don't have gasoline stations here on campus, and maybe the people that use the electric cars should pay a little extra to have that convenience, to have those charging stations put in. I don't know if we have to have them. I have read something before that some communities have to have them, like our communities, but I don't know for sure, but that's just some questions that have come up. Regarding the wood shop, which I've worked in, and I walked around it last month when I saw the capital improvement, I just don't know where we're getting $61,400 for chairs and chairs. I walked around, I took a look at them, I've sat on them, I've worked on them. There's some that have some torn upholstery, but they look like beautiful old well-made chairs, and it just seems like a high expenditure to me. And others believe the same. Sewing machines, after you had mentioned that, I didn't get a chance to look at the floor because I forgot, but I did go into the sewing room and I talked to a lady and I said, have you sewed in here for a long time? And she said, yes. I said, how are your sewing machines working? She said, fine. I said, do they have all the things that you want for sewing machines? She said, yeah, we just changed the foots. And I said, I noticed you have 12 stations, so you use 12 stations because I noticed they want 16 sewing machines. So I don't know if they want 6 extra. So I don't know what it is because I haven't talked to anybody. I mean, it's a hobby. It's not a clothing factory, but maybe if you get a smart machine, are people going to know how to run it? I also asked her, what do you do when you need repair? She said, oh, we have a guy that comes in. So I'm thinking, well, if you have somebody come in for a smart machine, it's going to cost a lot more. Just some things that I observed, and it looked like, and she said, yeah, the machines are working fine. So I'm thinking, well, why are we doing this? And that's not against anybody who's sewing. I like to sew, and I'll be, I've only been a resident 2 years, but I'll be popping in there. The other question is the storage remodel for $25,000. Is that going to be like a whole room? I mean, $25,000 is a lot of money. Is there something they could do with something that costs less, some other, storage built-ins or racks or something? These are just things that people are looking at as capital expenditures, kind of looking at it as fluff and questioning it. I mean, it's here, but I really don't know how it got here. What is the problem actually with the storage room that a whole room has to be built for, to the tune of $30,000? The same with the chairs. I mean, it would be great to have chairs. The guys want them, but there's just questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Our next speaker is Manuel Armendariz.
Hello, everybody. Thank you. I don't question the staff has worked very hard on this budget because I've compared this to version 1. I just want to make sure everybody focuses on the fact that in this version, the main reason why our assessment has gone down as far as the general operating items is because we have the benefit of about $1.5 million from reducing the fees that we have to pay for our pay TV. We also have an increase of $800,000 in the charges to the mutuals. And of course, that affects United, and that affects Third. So right there, those two numbers add up to $2.3 million decrease in operating expenses to Golden Ring Foundation. That's where your benefit is coming from. Now, I'm sure the staff looked at everything they could to try to hone it down to a reasonable amount. But the fact remains that the primary savings comes from those two items. And I thought Jeff was going to arrange to have us get a breakdown of that $3,161,000 that was being charged as far as cost items and then how it's allocated to the mutuals. And then the other thing that bothers me is that on the one hand, there's $2.23 reduction in those costs. but then on the other hand, it's taken away by the increase in the reserve contributions. And the bottom line is we only have a 22-cent decrease from version 1. And again, I don't know how they can justify that. I mean, they want to add the contingency fund, and where has those funds gone? They've gone to legal expenses. Okay, another thing that I know that in United, we're not quite sure what's going on with that issue. And the other thing I want to point out is if you look at legal fees, going across on the assessment page, there are some things I can't figure out. For example, if you look at legal fees there for 2017 actual, that shows $339,000. In the green book for the prior year, it shows $440,000. Also, if you flip back to page 12 of 34, again, if you look at legal fees, that also shows $440,000, not the amount that's on this summary. 2018 is even worse. If you look at that same page, legal fees for $218,000 are $856,000. If you look at the summary page, it's $506,000. And the budget for that prior year was $250,000. Something is wrong here with legal fees, okay? So for our contingency contribution to go from $2 to $5, and the primary use of those funds in the past has been for legal fees, that's just unacceptable. I mean, I'm not just thinking of, I'm thinking of all the members. Why should we be hit with something like that? So those are the main things I want you to focus on. One last item is that there's a 4 employee cut in the summary that details the employees. There's 3 out of MSC and 1 out of general services. And yet when you look at the amount of salaries and related costs, in salaries, there's only let me look here. There was only a $16,000 reduction. So again, I'd like an answer to that.
Okay.
Why is it only affected by such a small amount when there are 4 employees cut out?
Okay. Thank you, Manny. Yes, Sarah Moore?
Yeah. Cash Acquisition?
I like the figures you put. They're very nicely done. I need some clarification, basically. If you go to page 15 of 34, you are showing a flat facility fees of $4,320,000 every year after 21. Okay? And for year 2020, you're not showing any increase. But then you're handing out a chart that shows the fees have gone up in the room rentals and every other place. So is that figure correct? That's still the same as last year? And my second thing is, if we are collecting $5,000 per transaction, that equates to more than 800 sales. I don't believe our sales are that high. Our annual sales, 1, they're not fixed, and 2, they're not 800 a year. I thought it was more like 700, maybe even less than 700. I may be wrong. I have one more quick clarification I need. I see a whole bunch of stacks of furniture sitting in Clubhouse 4. Is that part of this workshop chairs already purchased or what? That's all I have to say.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it? Okay. Betty and Jeff. You want to?
Yeah, I can address a couple of these. The $4,320,000 is just the trust facility fee, and that's estimated at $5,000 per transaction, and we did use a 3-year average. So in 2015 and 2016, you had some high years, and the resales were over 1,000 units in each of those years. In 2017, you had 991 units. So it was 2018 that it dropped significantly to 783, and we're hoping you meet that, or you might come in a little lower by the end of 2019. And so we definitely used an average of those prior years. So you had some high years, some low years, and then we assumed that 10% of them won't have to pay based on the qualifications of the study. So, I mean, there's any number of assumptions we can make there. And so we kept it low for this year and next year, and then put it back to where it was with the better real estate market. But time will tell. If that doesn't come to fruition, then next year at this time, we'll bring that revenue projection back down.
And how about the fees on page 15?
And you'll have to, forgive me, I have a lot of papers here. Is that the agenda or the presentation?
I'm not sure.
Or the capital plan?
I think it's our reserve plan,
Page 15 was the 4,320,000. Right. So we talked about that. The allocation to mutuals, we put on the agenda for the next Finance Committee meeting.
Okay.
So the regular Finance Committee meeting, we're going to talk about specifics in the allocations. And trying to see what else. Manny's assessment was correct. The offsets to the operating costs were the removal of the Fox programming fees and an increase in allocation to the mutuals. So I tried to highlight that in every line item as we went through the presentation to show you where those department-to-department allocations changed, the reason for them based on the support calls, and then those receiving departments of those allocations, they end up supporting primarily the mutuals, then that cost becomes part of the mutual assessment. And I think general services, the question on a staffing reduction in general services. And I apologize because I don't have that staffing report right in front of me. So at the beginning of the agenda package, there's a staff report with a narrative for each division. So on page 3 of 34, it shows a reduction in the full-time equivalents from 93 down to 91 and a half. And then the main reason for the decrease in the assessment, besides the staffing reduction, was the increased allocation of vehicle maintenance costs out to the supporting departments that support the mutuals. Does that answer your question, Manny? On
And-
general services, page 3 of 34?
I'm comparing the version 1 to version 2, and in maintenance and construction, you had 189.50 employees. You reduced that down to 186.50. So that's 3 employees out of there in the seat. Same thing with general services. You compare version 1 and version 2, you had a 1 employee decrease. You got 4 employee decrease between version 1 and version 2, and yet very little effect on salaries and related costs.
Right, so that was because they're primarily supporting mutual functions. So those employees are in work centers that are primarily the mutuals. So like an
You might see it.
electrician, right, so like an electrician and a carpenter? Janitor, a janitor and electrician. So you would see very little effect in GRF of those reductions. But you did benefit from that in United.
And the interest income figures that we use for the reserves are based on what we're experiencing this year?
Mm-hmm. Yep, you have
Okay.
higher balances, and although we use a very conservative interest earnings percentage rate, but you have much higher balances than anticipated because you have a lot of carryover items for projects that haven't been spent yet.
Manny, one time only.
Only other item has legal fees. Legal fees,
Got it.
differences in amounts.
Okay.
If you look at the
Okay.
different schedules.
Okay.
And so I guess the clarification I would provide on legal fees, I mean, we could do a whole spreadsheet analysis and talk about legal fees for quite a while, but we isolated the VMS legal fees, which is the employment-related cost. That's in Work Center 700 for human resources. And in 2018, those actuals were just over $700,000. This year, we're projecting them to be $500,000. And so next year, we budgeted a total of $450,000 for those specific legal fees. And then we divided that 1/3 each between GRF United and Third, so $150,000 in each of the corporations. So that's VMS specific. And then each corporation decided how much to budget for their own corporate counsel for all other issues.
So, but maybe legal fees is something we can look at in finance, just to sort of get a feel for where we've been and where we're going, and is there another way for us to?
And I think it will help on Friday or Thursday and Friday when we talk at the mutuals about their legal fees, and then the $150,000 allocation of VMS legal fees.
Okay. I will go ahead and I'll go around, but I'll start this time with Dick. Do you have any comments or questions about the member comments?
I think they did a great job.
No comment.
No comment.
No comment.
No? Pat?
I just wanted to say, as far as the legal fees are concerned, I believe that has to do with a lot of employee-related small claims and what have you, and also the one as far as the workman's compensation is concerned, where we may have to pay surplus over that. Thank you.
And I'll address Mr. Park. We are very diligently right now, as we speak, working on our portfolio, just so you know. We are doing that now.
Nothing. Done.
I came up with a lot of the same types of questions that you had. Staff has answered them at several meetings, and the interest income is better, much better than expected, and they are employing our funds. So thank you. I'm very pleased with the numbers.
I think we stuck with the purpose of this meeting is to pull everything together in a summarizing form. Then we've gone through the details in other meetings, and we're ready to bring it to the next board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. That was what I was going to say, that this was more of a higher level, that we have, in fact, some of the comments that we've heard those same comments and have addressed them in other forms. So I think where we are now is, can we get a motion to accept the budget as presented? Or if, yeah, go ahead.
I'll make the motion to accept this budget as, the 2020 budget as presented.
I'll second it.
Okay, got a second from Pat. And so did we want any more discussion? Then all those in favor? And all those opposed? Was that okay? I'm sorry, we could have done it by, that was all right? Okay, then then it passes. And I am now handing the gavel that I never actually got to play with over back to Beth. Thank you.
And I get to play with the gavel. So thank you all. Thank you, staff. Thank you for community members and the people at the dais. And this meeting is adjourned.